of seeds that exist in these gardens. I thought about bringing one of them tonight, and then I forgot to pick it up. So we begin to see the seeds of the same things that are unseen. And then we move a little further and we go through another arbor that has beautiful flowers and seed pods coming, purple flowers, seed pods coming from that flowering vine that goes over the second arch. And we begin to see the seeds in a multitude of ways. There's apple trees and there's fig trees and unique seeds producing fruit after their own kind. Each of us is a unique expression designed to produce the fruit of that expression after our own kind. And our destiny path is being revealed to us in every moment that we breathe, especially as we breathe consciously. And then we sit at the jade table. And I love to do the jade table in an experience of writing your soul. So you begin to communicate with divine mind. Neil Donald Walsh called it Conversations with God. I love to call it Write Your Soul. You can communicate with your higher self. There are many ways for you to do this communication, but it's a soul conversation. And I find it very, very important in this third stage, still in the invisible, to indent when I change the voice from what I know as the invisible voice that I'm hearing from beyond the veils, from the invisible, and my human voice that sometimes feels confused or sad or has grief and doesn't know, and we could switch back and forth between the two voices. It's called sometimes journaling. It's not really journaling. It's a whole different spiritual practice. And it's one of the most important spiritual practices that I do. And it has led me through, guided me through the most difficult times of my life. And we begin to sit at that table and get glimpses of the soul. And then we go to the fourth site in the garden, and there are subsites within this fourth site. Charles Fillmore talks about this site as including understanding, and the symbol of that understanding in the fourth site is a small bodhisattva. Our understanding is smaller here, and yet it's beginning to emerge, and in site 4, the invisible moves into the invisible. This is where we move from the realms that are not yet manifest into becoming conscious manifestors of co-creation. And we prepare to be midwives of this birth. And it requires understanding. If we go into judgment, we're immediately going off track. If we go into some of the words that some of you have found, if you're familiar with David Hawkins and the map of consciousness or transcending the levels of consciousness, some of the words that we find beneath the level of 200 in the realms of duality, we can go off track in this fourth level of manifestation. But this is where the beginnings of manifestation occur. And included in this site is not only understanding, but also will. Will as the executive power of our mind, guided by divine will. This is where we are required to go into action. We have to act on the glimpses of the soul that we've gotten through divine imagination at the jade table and the previous side. We have to, and we usually don't see the whole blueprint for all of the action. We just see the next step right in front of us. We don't know the whole plan. We couldn't even comprehend it if we saw it, it's like we are the divine architects sitting at the jade table, drawing the plans, but that's not the building. That is the beginning of a process. And there has to be a whole lot of steps in the creation that is going to come. And so this site in the garden is about some of those steps that include going into action. And for the first time, we are seeing pieces of the puzzle. And we're seeing humans in our lives that perhaps are going to be partners with us, or perhaps are going to join with us in the creation, because ultimately it's going to be a co-creation. We don't know that yet because we're still in the realms of competition. And in the realms of competition, we're more into win-lose, and we don't comprehend what's beyond competition, which is collaboration. And so this site in the garden is about divine will. But there's more still in the garden for this particular site. This is another picture of the Bodhisattva of understanding that's there at Site 4. And then a beautiful other addition to that is where you see the cosmic Om going into all of the seasons of the year. And this refers back to the Old Testament in Proverbs, where it says, for everything there is a season. This is timelessness coming into time. And sometimes we try to rush the manifestation. We aren't very good with deferred gratification. We want instantaneous gratification. And we do all kinds of interesting things like go into heavy debt and all kinds of things that in order to get those kinds of instant gratifications. So this is about timelessness coming into time. And for everything there is a season. And in the middle of that circle is the cosmic Om, the sound of the universe pulsating, that divine sound that is the same one that is in the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. And so that's at Site 4, but then there's one more piece of that. And notice, this is Our Lady of Guadalupe. And this is sort of a transition out of that. And oh, by the way, the previous sites are in the spiral, in both integral and in spiral dynamics, are orange. And my beloved friend Russ Hudson, one time when we were having lunch in Laguna Beach, and he looked at all of the amazing wealth that exists in this county that we call Orange County. Russ's comment was, Orange County is very orange. So, but there comes a time in our evolution of consciousness, the developmental stages that we go through, where all of that orangeness no longer fulfills our souls. And we reach those points where we say, there's got to be more than this. And my hunch is that some of you sitting in this room have experienced that point, where you probably walked away from wealth, perhaps, probably walked away from things that you thought were extremely important in your life, and you knew that there was something more. So this is giving you a hint of where you are in your own path, even as you recognize these stages in your life. And Our Lady of Guadalupe has a cape with the sun and the moon and the stars. So this is where the awareness of all of the cycles and the seasons that are cosmic come into play. And this is where the awareness of cosmic astrology can be very, very useful. And it brings us into awareness of even experiences such as the Akashic records, which are about the journey of the soul over many, many lifetimes. And interestingly, Tomar Levine is on the call today, who does Akashic readings for business. Now, I don't call Called by Love a business, but she actually did an Akashic reading on Called by Love, and I was totally, totally stunned by the words that just channeled through her from the Akashic records. So you can tell that I am open to knowing the mysteries. And I hope you are too. There's an interesting part of Our Lady of Guadalupe. There's a sign there at that site about being weighed down with grief. Sometimes we begin to feel the weight of the world with grief. And so that can be another stage that we are moving through that is almost like a womb experience that is taking us further in our journey. And our human mind sometimes doesn't want to go through the kinds of things where there's loss. But sometimes the experiences of our life and our destiny invite us to recognize that stages have elements that dissolve in order that the elements of the new can actually give birth. So you might want to ask yourself in this stage of your life, what has dissolved in order that the new could give birth? And I can certainly think of some things in my life that fall into that category. And yet, these are the keys to, these codes are the keys to everything. That includes the more that is part of your destiny that will give birth if you stay in the alignment. And then we move into the fifth day, which is about choice. And this is in the Old Testament. It's the story of Joshua, where Joshua is leading the children of Israel into the promised land, and he's getting a lot of resistance and kickback, and they are not all wanting to do what he's telling them. And he says, choose ye this day whom ye will serve. But as for me and my house, my state of consciousness, my being, we will serve the Lord. We will serve the Lord. We're going to stay aligned with the higher awareness that's emerging. We're not going to go into separation. We're not going to go into all of that kickback and resistance. We don't relate to that. That's not what we are about. We're unhooking from those, what are potentially karmic patterns of our lives, our families, our institutions, our cultures. We have a karmic pattern in this country that we are going to have to face up to, and it's showing up now hugely in our Congress. It's showing up as a split, that it brings us into paralysis and takes us into being frozen. Does that make sense? Have to find the ways to go beyond those kinds of polarities and find the higher order that's beyond. Remember the words of Rumi? There is a field beyond right and wrong. I will meet you there. And so we're at the choice point, and there's two levels of choice. One is the birds of the sky, and this is in Genesis, the first chapter, the fifth day. The birds of the sky, some winged beings that can fly high. And the other choice is the great sea monsters. Did you know that it talks about great sea monsters?